You didn't lose him. He lost someone who would have moved mountains for him. Let that sink in for a moment, Queen. You didn't lose anything when you walked away. He did. And what he lost wasn't just someone who cared. It was someone who gave him every ounce of love, energy, and effort, only for him to take it all for granted. He thought you'd never leave, thought you'd always stay, no matter how little he gave back. But here's the truth. You don't move mountains for someone who can't even bother to climb with you. See, here's what men like him don't understand. They think love is about control. They think you'll stay tethered to them, no matter how much they take, no matter how much they drain you. But the second you wake up and realize that you don't need him, that you never needed him, his entire world starts to crack. Because, Queen, his power over you wasn't real. It was built on a lie that you needed him to feel whole. The moment you stopped believing that lie, he lost his hold on you. And that's what shatters his ego. Before we get into this deeper, hit that like button to help spread this message to more queens out there who need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe if you're ready to reclaim your power and rewrite your story. Because today, it's all about you. Let's be real. Society doesn't want you to know this. They've spent centuries telling women that their worth is tied to a man's approval, that their happiness depends on whether or not a man chooses them. But here's the truth they don't want you to hear. Your worth has nothing to do with him. You're not the supporting character in his story. You're the main character of your own. And the moment you realize that, that's the moment everything changes. When you stop chasing him, stop trying to prove yourself to him, you disrupt his entire reality. You see, he thought he had you figured out, thought he could string you along forever, feeding you crumbs of attention to keep you hooked. But when you walk away, not with anger, not with drama, but with calm, quiet strength, you send a message louder than any argument ever could. I don't need you. I never did. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine he's standing on a shaky pedestal, one you've spent years holding up. Every compliment you gave, every sacrifice you made, every time you forgave him when he didn't deserve it, it all propped him up. But when you decide you're done, when you step away and let go, that pedestal collapses. He falls hard, because his entire sense of control was built on the belief that you'd always stay. The moment you stop playing his game, the game ends. This isn't about hurting him. It's not about revenge or proving a point. It's about something so much bigger. It's about reclaiming your peace. It's about choosing yourself for once. And let me tell you something, Queen. That's not selfish. That's survival. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot keep setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Walking away isn't weakness. It's the ultimate act of strength. He may act like he doesn't care. He may pretend your absence means nothing to him. But trust me, behind all that bravado, he feels it. He feels the weight of your absence, the silence where your love and energy used to be. And that silence, it's deafening. It forces him to face the one thing he never wanted to admit. You were the best thing he had. This is your time to rise, to rebuild, to take all that energy you used to pour into him and invest it in yourself, your dreams, your peace, your happiness. You didn't lose him, Queen. You found yourself. And that's the greatest gift you could ever give yourself. Now, let's affirm this together. I didn't lose him. I found me. Write it in the comments below. Let it be your declaration today. Your words could be the spark another queen needs to start her own journey. Stay with me, because we're just getting started. By the end of this, you won't just know your worth, you'll own it. Let's dive in. Number 1. He was never the support You were the whole damn foundation. He made you believe he was the center of everything, didn't he? That without him, your world would crumble. He spun this illusion so carefully, so subtly, that you didn't even notice it at first. It wasn't obvious. It was hidden in the smallest, most unassuming ways. A casual comment that made you second-guess yourself. An expectation so silent, you almost thought it came from you. He'd give you just enough attention to keep you hanging on, only to pull back and leave you starving for more. It was a game, deliberate or not, and for too long you played along. You poured so much of yourself into trying to make him happy, trying to earn his approval. You built him up, fed his ego, while receiving nothing but crumbs in return. But let me tell you something, Queen. His control over you was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. The moment you finally stepped back, when you stopped chasing, when you stopped playing by his rules, it was like pulling the curtain back on a magician's trick. The illusion shattered, and with it, the so-called power he thought he had over you disappeared. Here's the truth. His control was never real. It was something you allowed. It wasn't his strength that kept you there. It was your belief that you needed him. But the moment you wake up, the moment you realize you don't need his approval to feel worthy, everything changes. That's the moment you stop looking to him for validation and start looking within. Let me ask you this. How long have you been giving him credit for holding up your world? Because he didn't. You did. You've always been the one holding it together, carrying the weight and making the sacrifices. He wasn't the pillar. You were the entire foundation. And guess what? You're still standing, even without him. It's like waking up from a bad dream. For so long, he had you convinced that you couldn't breathe without him. But the air, it was always yours to claim. He thought he was indispensable, that you'd never leave. But when you walked away, you forced him to confront a truth he wasn't ready for. You were never the one who needed him. He was the one who needed you. There's a quote I want you to hold on to. We suffer not from events themselves, but from the judgment we attach to them. For too long, you let his absence feel like a loss, like you were losing a piece of yourself. But Queen, his absence wasn't the storm. It was the clearing sky. The moment you stop seeing him as your anchor and start building your own strength, the illusion unravels. You realize his presence or absence was never the key to your happiness. Here's the truth about power. It's not about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. The moment you shift your focus inward, when you stop trying to fit into his world and instead start creating your own, that's when the game changes. It's not about proving a point to him. It's about proving to yourself that you're more than enough, with or without him. Think of it like this. You were like a bird in a cage, pacing endlessly, convinced your safety depended on those bars. But the cage, it was never your home. It was your limitation. And the moment that door opened, you didn't just escape. You soared. You were never trapped by his presence, Queen. You only believed you were. From his perspective, he built his confidence on the idea that you needed him more than he needed you. That you'd always be there, waiting, proving, giving. But when you chose to walk away, when you stopped feeding into his game, he had to face something he never expected. A version of you thriving without him. A version of you who no longer cared about his attention or his validation. Let me tell you why this hits him so hard. Men like him, the ones who thrive on control, don't know what to do when the dynamic shifts. Their ego depends on you needing them, on you staying tethered to them. But the moment you cut that rope, their entire foundation cracks. He thought he was the sun and that you revolved around him. But here's what he didn't realize. You're the entire damn universe. This isn't about being cruel. It's not about getting revenge. It's about reclaiming your freedom, your peace, your sense of self. When you stop needing to control how he sees you, when you stop needing his approval, you free yourself from the shackles of his ego. You become someone who doesn't just survive his absence, you thrive in it. Imagine the ocean. Waves crash and retreat, but the shore doesn't move. That's you, Queen. The shore. No matter how he comes and goes, your strength doesn't waver. His absence isn't your downfall, it's your chance to rise. Now breathe that in and say it with me. I don't need him to feel whole. I am already enough. Write it in the comments. Let those words be your truth. Let them be the start of your next chapter. Number 2. You took back your power, and it broke him. When you walked away, you didn't just end a relationship. You took back control of a story he thought he was writing. In his mind, he believed he had you right where he wanted. He thought you'd chase him, beg for his attention, and fall apart if he ever decided to leave. He relied on the idea that his absence would shatter you. But when you stepped back, not with anger, not with desperation, but with quiet, undeniable strength, you didn't just surprise him. You completely destroyed the fantasy he built for himself. Here's the truth. Independence, real independence, is something men like him don't expect. He thought you needed him to feel whole, to feel worthy. He was so sure you'd tether your happiness to his validation that when you didn't, it hit harder than any words ever could. You didn't fight. You didn't try to prove anything to him. You just let go. And in that moment, you took back every ounce of power he thought he held over you. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what you did. Walking away wasn't about rejecting him. It was about choosing your peace. It was about realizing that no man's approval is the foundation of your happiness. And when you send that message, not through arguments or drama, but by simply living your life, his ego doesn't just bruise, it breaks. Imagine him holding a kite string, thinking the only reason the kite can fly is because of him. But then the string snaps, and instead of the kite falling, it soars higher than ever, moving with the wind, free and unbound. That's you. You didn't fall apart without him, you soared. And for someone whose confidence relied on controlling your emotions, that's a bitter pill to swallow. He might act indifferent now, pretending like your decision to walk away doesn't bother him. But indifference is often the loudest cry of discomfort. Behind that mask of calm, he feels it. He feels the weight of your absence. And when he scrolls through glimpses of your life, your growth, your peace, your joy, it becomes a mirror he didn't ask for. Every time he sees you thriving, it forces him to confront the truth he wasn't prepared for. He wasn't as important as he thought. Every step forward you take is a silent reminder that he misjudged you. He expected you to stumble. He expected you to need him. But instead, you're thriving, not in spite of him, but because you refuse to let him define you. You broke free, and now he has to sit with the realization that his absence didn't break you, it freed you. You might wonder, did he ever really care? The answer lies in the nature of his control. When someone's ego feeds on your need for them, it's not about love, it's about dominance. And when you walked away with grace, when you detached with calm resolve, you took away his ability to dictate your worth. That wasn't just a blow to his ego, it was a revelation. Let me paint it for you another way. Think of a candle in the dark. The flame doesn't flicker or fade. It burns steady, unwavering, unaffected by the wind. That's what your calm strength does. It makes you dangerous in the best possible way. You didn't lash out, you didn't crumble, and you didn't look back with longing. Instead, you turned inward and built yourself up, piece by piece, becoming someone whose strength doesn't depend on anyone else. This is what true freedom looks like. Stoicism teaches us that freedom begins when you realize what you can control: your thoughts, your actions, your peace. You've shown that your value isn't something that can be taken away by rejection, indifference, or absence. That kind of strength, it's magnetic. It forces others to look inward, to confront their insecurities, and to face the truth that they were never the center of your universe. In the silence you left behind, there's a truth that lingers. You didn't need him. And in not needing him, you exposed his vulnerability. It wasn't cruelty or coldness that broke his ego. It was your self-respect. You didn't just walk away, you walked into your freedom. And that's what hit him the hardest. Breathe that in, Queen. Say it with me. I don't need him because I am already enough. Write it in the comments. Let it be your truth today, your declaration of independence. You didn't lose him. You found yourself. And that's where your story begins. Number 3. Your kindness was never weakness, and that's what shook him. He mistook your kindness for weakness, didn't he? Your patience, your compassion, your willingness to give so much of yourself. It made him think he had you under his thumb. He thought your gentleness came from insecurity, that you stayed because you couldn't imagine life without him. But here's the truth he never understood. Your kindness wasn't about him at all. It was about you. See, true kindness doesn't come from a place of fear or need. It comes from strength. You weren't kind because you needed his validation. You were kind because that's who you are. A woman with integrity, a woman who believes in treating people with decency, a woman who chooses peace over chaos. He thought you'd tolerate anything, that you'd bend endlessly to keep the relationship alive. But even the kindest heart has limits, and he crossed them. There comes a point when kindness turns into self-preservation, when patience becomes a lesson in boundaries, and when he took your generosity for granted, treating it like an entitlement instead of the gift it was. You made a choice he never saw coming. You chose yourself. That choice was seismic. It wasn't just about walking away, it was about proving to yourself and to him that your kindness was never a sign of weakness. It was strength all along, and that's what broke him. He thought you stayed because you couldn't live without him, but your silence told a completely different story. You didn't walk away because you gave up. You walked away because you'd finally had enough. Marcus Aurelius said it best. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. You didn't lash out. You didn't throw a tantrum or beg for his understanding. You didn't even try to explain. You simply walked away, letting your absence say what words never could. And that silence? It hit harder than any argument ever would. Think of a mountain, steady, calm, and unmoved by the storms that rage around it. That's the kind of strength your kindness represented. You didn't crumble, you didn't react, and you didn't shrink. You stood firm, and when he realized your approval didn't depend on his, it shook him to his core. Now, he's sitting with questions he never thought he'd have to ask. Did I misjudge her? How did I lose someone who gave me so much? Why isn't she shattered without me? These questions aren't about regret. They're about his ego. He assumed your patience came from weakness, but the truth is, it took far more strength to stay true to your values than to play his games. And it took even more strength to walk away. You showed him something he never expected. You value your peace more than his opinion. That's a powerful statement, Queen. You set boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect your own self-respect. And in doing so, you taught him the hardest lesson of all. Your worth is not up for negotiation. Imagine a lighthouse standing strong against crashing waves. The waves are the chaos, the emotional storms that people like him bring into your life. But the lighthouse? It doesn't move. It shines, guiding itself and others through the darkness. That's the essence of your kindness. It's not about tolerating disrespect. It's about having the courage to protect your peace, even if it means walking away from someone who refuses to see your value. His ego may have crumbled under the weight of your decision, but your life flourished. Your silence and your self-respect became a testament to your strength. He thought you needed him to feel whole, but your actions proved the opposite. You were already whole. His absence didn't break you. It clarified things for you. It made you see that your power was never tied to him. You might wonder, does he regret it? Does he realize what he lost? But let me tell you something. It doesn't matter. His realization, or lack of it, is irrelevant. What matters is that you moved forward. You didn't wait for him to change, and you didn't wait for an apology. You simply chose yourself, and that was the most powerful thing you could have done. Kindness isn't about weakness. It's about strength. And he misunderstood yours from the very beginning. He saw your gentleness as something to take advantage of. But by the time he realized his mistake, you were already gone. You didn't lose anything when you walked away. He did. And now, while he's left to deal with the echo of his own misjudgments, you're moving forward, unshaken and unstoppable. Say this with me, Queen. My kindness is my strength, not my weakness. Write it in the comments below, because there's power in claiming your truth. Let this be the reminder that your peace, your strength, and your self-respect will always shine brighter than anyone's attempts to diminish them. You didn't need him to see your worth. You already knew it. And now, you're thriving in a way he never expected. Keep shining, Queen. Number 4. You left the game, and his world fell apart. He thought he had you right where he wanted. His game was simple. Keep you guessing, keep you chasing, keep you proving yourself while he stayed comfortably in control. At first, it didn't seem like a game, did it? It felt like playful banter, a little tension to keep things exciting. A teasing comment here, a sudden silence there. You thought it was normal, just part of the relationship. But slowly, his rules became clear. You were meant to give, and he was meant to take. And what happened when you gave him everything? The silences grew longer. The affection became sporadic. You started questioning yourself. Was it something you said? Something you did? Maybe if you tried harder, proved yourself more, things would go back to how they were at the start. But they didn't, because that's the point of his game. It's rigged. The rules were always stacked in his favor, and your role was simple. Keep playing, keep chasing, keep giving him the power. But here's the twist he never saw coming. You stopped playing. You stopped chasing his approval, stopped reacting to the little tests he threw your way. Those silent treatments, those cold shoulders, those moments where he dangled validation just out of reach like a carrot on a stick. You saw through it, and instead of begging for his attention, you took back your own. The moment you decided you were done, the whole game fell apart. His control over you was never real. It existed only because you allowed it. He didn't expect you to realize that. He thought you'd stay stuck in the cycle forever. But when you stepped back, when you reclaimed your focus on your peace, your values, your life, you took away the one thing his power relied on, your participation. As Marcus Aurelius wisely said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And that's exactly what you did. You stopped giving him control over your emotions. You grounded yourself in what truly mattered, your self-respect, your boundaries, your inner peace. And the second you did, you shattered the illusion he had carefully built around you. Think of his control like a shadow on a wall. It seems huge, intimidating, impossible to escape. But shadows only exist when there's something blocking the light. The moment you turn to face the light, your own truth, your own strength, the shadow disappeared. For him, this was devastating. His confidence was built on the belief that you needed him, that you'd always stay, always fight to prove your worth, always give him your attention. But when you walked away, when you refused to play along, he was left with nothing but the harsh reality. His power over you was never real. Walking away wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving a point or punishing him. It was deeper than that. It was about reclaiming your agency, your freedom. It was a declaration, not to him, but to yourself, that your worth isn't up for negotiation, that your peace of mind isn't something you're willing to compromise for anyone. You might be wondering, was it the right decision? Was walking away really worth it? Let me answer that for you. Absolutely. Think of a bird in a cage. Sure, the cage might feel safe. It's familiar. But a bird's true nature is to fly, not to stay locked behind bars. When you walked away, you didn't just leave the cage. You chose freedom. Freedom from his manipulations. Freedom from constantly doubting yourself. Freedom from the exhausting cycle of trying to meet his impossible standards. And that kind of freedom, it's priceless. Manipulation only works when you react to it. Control only exists if you give it permission. By walking away, by stepping into your strength, you didn't just break free. You showed him and yourself that you were strong all along. And here's what really breaks him. He expected you to crumble. He thought you'd come running back, begging for the scraps of affection he was so used to throwing your way. But you didn't. Instead, you thrived. You stopped waiting for him to change and started changing your own life. You didn't need his approval to feel whole, and that's what destroys him. Let me paint this for you. Imagine him standing on a pedestal, one you spent years building with your energy, your love, your sacrifices. Every ounce of validation you gave him was another brick holding him up. But the moment you stepped back, the moment you said no more, the pedestal collapsed, and now he's left to deal with the fallout. This isn't about revenge, Queen. It's about growth, about realizing that his opinion of you was never the source of your strength. You've always had the power, and by walking away, you didn't just regain your freedom, you became unshakable. That kind of strength, it can't be taken from you, no matter how much he tries. Breathe this in. I'm not playing his game anymore because I've already won. Say it out loud. Write it in the comments. Let that be your truth today. You didn't just leave his game, you rewrote the rules. And the best part? You're living proof that walking away isn't the end. It's the beginning of everything you deserve. Number 5. He's still watching because your growth shook him. Even now, long after you've moved on, he's still watching. Maybe it's late at night, scrolling through your social media, piecing together the story of your life without him. Maybe he's asking mutual friends for updates, pretending not to care, but fishing for every little detail. Or maybe he says nothing at all, sitting in silence, replaying the same haunting question over and over in his mind. How is she thriving without me? When he walked away, he thought he held all the cards. He believed he was the foundation of your happiness, the light in your life. He assumed you'd struggle, falter, maybe even crawl back to him. That belief fed his ego, gave him a sense of power, and kept him convinced that you couldn't possibly survive without him. But then something happened that he never expected. You didn't fall. You rose. Every step forward you took without him, every smile, every success, every moment of peace became a crack in the story he told himself. Because the truth was never about anger or revenge. Your growth wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving to yourself that you were always capable of standing tall on your own. Imagine this: a dam built to block a river, holding back its flow. For a while it seems like it's working, but then, little by little, the water gathers strength, finds new paths, carves through rock and earth with unstoppable resolve. That's you. You didn't dwell on what was lost. You redirected your energy, creating a life that flows stronger, deeper, and more powerfully than before. And he can't look away. He thought your life would collapse without him, but instead you became the woman he never imagined. Stronger, more confident, completely at peace. And now, in his quiet moments, the questions creep in. Was I wrong? Did I underestimate her? The truth is, your growth has become a mirror he didn't ask for. Every success you've achieved forces him to face a reality he never considered, that his role in your life wasn't as important as he thought. He believed he was the centerpiece of your happiness, but your life without him tells a different story. And here's the kicker. It's not that you're trying to break his ego. Your growth naturally dismantles the lies he told himself. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." That's exactly what you've done. You didn't sink to his level. You didn't play games or seek revenge. You simply lived with integrity, focused on yourself, and let your actions speak louder than any words ever could. He may be trying to make sense of his choices, questioning what he lost. But here's the truth. His reasons for watching don't matter. What matters is that your happiness, your strength, and your peace are entirely your own. You've reclaimed your independence, and it's not something you project outwardly to seek attention. It's something you live and breathe every single day. It's in the way you move forward with confidence, the way you choose yourself without hesitation, the way you continue to grow. And that's what he can't stop thinking about, the realization that you didn't need him, and you never will. So let him watch, Queen. Let him sit with the weight of his own choices. You, on the other hand, will keep rising, calm, focused, free, and exactly as you were always meant to be. Number 6. When you left, he had to face himself. Your absence didn't just leave a void in his life. It forced him to face something far more uncomfortable, himself, without you there to absorb his frustrations, his insecurities, and his doubts. He was left alone with the one thing he's been avoiding this entire time, his own reflection. And let's be honest, Queen, that reflection, it's not one he likes to see. When he criticized you, when he made you feel small, it was never really about you. His words were projections of his own fears, his own inadequacies. You were his emotional shield, the person he used to deflect everything he didn't want to deal with within himself. But now, without you in the picture, there's no one left to point the finger at. And that's a hard truth for him to face. You might notice he's rewriting the story now. He'll tell himself, and maybe even others, that you were the problem, that you were too demanding, too sensitive, too hard to handle. He'll play the victim because that's easier than admitting the truth. Your strength, not your weakness, is what ended it all. Here's the thing though, Whether he grows from this or stays stuck in denial isn't your responsibility. You didn't walk away to teach him a lesson. You walked away to reclaim your peace. And in doing so, you created clarity, not just for him, but for yourself. Let me break it down for you. When you were with him, he convinced himself that his flaws didn't exist because you were always there to carry the weight. If he was insecure, you reassured him. If he was selfish, you bent over backward to accommodate him. If he messed up, you forgave him. Again and again. You were his safety net, and he relied on you more than he'll ever admit. But when you left, the net disappeared. And for the first time, he had to look down and see just how shaky his foundation really was. Imagine this, a mirror covered in dirt, smudges and cracks. While you were there, you absorbed all his negativity, so he never had to clean the glass. But now that you're gone, the dirt is all he sees. He has to confront what's always been there, and it's not pretty. You might wonder, does he regret it? Does he even care? The answer doesn't matter, because his growth, or lack of it, isn't your problem. Your only job was to free yourself, to step away from a dynamic that no longer served you. And you did that. Whether or not he learns from the silence you left behind is entirely up to him. Here's the truth, Queen. When you walked away, you didn't just leave a relationship. You removed his emotional crutch. And while he's stumbling to find balance, you're over here thriving. You're glowing. You're free. And that freedom, it's the loudest, most powerful statement you could ever make. Breathe it in and affirm this. I don't carry what isn't mine. I am free. Write it in the comments, Queen, and let that truth sink in. You've done your part. Now it's time to keep moving forward. Number 7. He needed you to need him, and that's why it hurt so much. Let's get one thing straight. He didn't need your love. He needed your need. For some men, being needed is how they validate their worth. It's not about who they are as a person. It's about the control they feel when you rely on them, when they believe they're the reason you're happy, grounded, or whole. And when you showed him that you didn't need him to feel complete, it wasn't just a bruise to his ego. It shattered his entire self-image. You see, his power didn't come from being indispensable. It came from the illusion that he was. His ego thrived on the idea that you depended on him, that your world would somehow fall apart if he weren't in it. But then you woke up. You realized your happiness doesn't come from him. It comes from within. You stopped looking to him for approval, for direction, for meaning, and that's when the facade he built for himself began to crack. Think of it this way. He was like a magician performing a show, keeping your attention with distractions, smoke, and mirrors. But the moment you saw through the tricks, the moment you stopped clapping and walked out of the theater, he was left standing on stage, exposed. Without your belief in his act, there was no show. That's exactly what you did when you chose self-reliance. You held up a mirror to his insecurities, forcing him to face the truth he'd been avoiding. His worth wasn't rooted in who he was. It was rooted in how much control he believed he had over you. This wasn't an act of indifference on your part. It was an act of strength. You didn't stop loving. You just stopped relying. And that difference, Queen, is what broke him. Because men like him don't know what to do when they're no longer the center of someone else's universe. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what you did. You stopped trying to control how he saw you or how much he cared. You stopped fighting for a place in his world and started building your own. Imagine this. A lighthouse standing tall and steady while a storm rages around it. The storm believes it can break the lighthouse, shake its foundation, but the lighthouse doesn't need the storm to shine. That's you, Queen. Your light was never dependent on him, and when you finally stopped dimming yourself for his comfort, it became undeniable. Here's what hurt him most. Your independence didn't just prove he wasn't needed, it showed him he was replaceable. And that's the hardest truth for someone whose ego relies on being the source of your happiness. But here's the twist. You didn't walk away to hurt him. You walked away to heal yourself. So let's affirm this together. I don't need him to feel whole. I am whole on my own. Write it in the comments, Queen. Let it be your truth today. Because the moment you believe that, you're unstoppable. Number 8. You stepped out of his shadow and found the light. This was never about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to him, making him regret, or forcing him to see your worth. This was always about something far more important, rediscovering yourself. For so long you lived with his influence lingering over your life, his opinions, his approval, his validation. But when you finally stopped centering him in your world, something incredible happened. You poured all of that energy back into yourself, your goals, your values, your passions, and that transformation. It spoke louder than any words ever could. He expected chaos. He thought you'd break without him. Maybe he even believed you'd come crawling back, desperate to fill the void he left behind. But instead, you did the one thing he never anticipated. You thrived. Your calm, your strength, your refusal to fall apart sent a message he couldn't ignore. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, deliberate, and powerful. Picture this: a tree that's been overshadowed for years, its roots confined, its growth stunted. But when the shadow disappears, when the tree is finally given light, it doesn't hesitate. It grows stronger, taller, and more resilient than ever. That's you, Queen. You stepped out of his shadow and you became unstoppable. Here's the truth. His control was never about strength. It was about illusion. He thought he could shape your world by withholding his attention, his affection, his approval. But the second you stopped chasing those scraps, the entire illusion fell apart. He wasn't your foundation. He was the weight you were carrying. And when you put that weight down, you realized just how much lighter, how much freer you could be. This shift wasn't about him. It was about you. You started living for yourself, and in doing so, you reclaimed your power. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." And when your thoughts stopped revolving around him, you opened the door to something far greater: peace. Maybe he's watching you now, trying to make sense of it all. Maybe he's wondering why you're not crumbling, why you're not reaching out. And the answer is simple. You've outgrown him. You've built a life rooted in self-respect, a life that no longer depends on his presence. His absence wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one written entirely by you. This isn't about bitterness, Queen. It's about freedom, true freedom, the kind that comes when you stop letting someone else dictate your worth, the kind that comes when you realize you've always been enough, all on your own. Say this with me: I don't live in anyone's shadow. I am the light. Write it in the comments. Let that be your truth today. Because the woman you're becoming, she doesn't just survive without him, she thrives. And that's a story worth writing.